Imagine a 15-year-old counting out exact change for the electric bill at the kitchen table, or a boy in a diner apron balancing a cash drawer down to the penny before his shift ends, or a girl at the stove timing a pot roast for a family of 6 while her mother's still at work. Here are 12 life responsibilities 1960s teenagers had fully mastered before they ever wore a graduation gown. This isn't really about chores. It's about the difference between a teenager who is managed and a teenager who is trusted. A managed teen gets told what to do, step by step, with someone checking behind them. A trusted teen just gets handed the job and left alone to do it right. Somewhere between 1975 and today, we quietly moved the finish line for adulthood, back by about 10 years. Nobody voted on it. Nobody announced it. It just happened, one generation at a time, until being responsible became something you hoped a 25-year-old had figured out instead of something you expected from a kid in high school. If this is the kind of thing that makes you miss an America that expected more of its kids, go ahead and hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. Because these are the 12 responsibilities a 1960s teenager carried, quietly, without praise, without a class teaching it, that most 30-year-olds today have never once been handed. Number 12. Managing a paycheck. A 1960s teenager with a summer job didn't hand that check to a parent to sort out. He cashed it himself at the bank window, folded the bills into his pocket, and made every decision from there. How much went into savings? How much went toward a bike, a jacket, or a ticket to the movies? Nobody stood over his shoulder telling him what to do with money he had earned with his own 2 hands. That was the whole point. Earning it and managing it were the same lesson, taught at the same time. And once a teenager understood what money was worth, the next lesson was about what it cost to skip paying for something. Which brings us to laundry. Number 11. Doing the family laundry. This wasn't tossing a shirt in a hamper and forgetting about it. A teenager in the 1960s might wash clothes by hand or in an old wringer machine, hang them out to dry on a line in the backyard, then iron them once they were stiff and dry. Start to finish, one person, one job. There was no mother quietly finishing the parts a kid left half done. If the shirt came out wrinkled, it was because the teenager hadn't ironed it right, and everyone at breakfast would know it. That kind of full ownership, seeing a job through from start to finish, with no one catching your mistakes, was training for something even bigger. Feeding people. Number 10. Cooking a full family dinner alone. Not a bowl of cereal. Not a sandwich thrown together in 2 minutes. A real dinner, timed and planned, for a family of 4, 5, 6 people who were counting on it being ready when they walked through the door. A teenage girl might work from a recipe card tucked in a kitchen drawer, or just from memory, watching a pot roast so it didn't dry out, keeping the vegetables from turning to mush, making sure everything hit the table warm and at the same time. If dinner was late or burnt, there was no backup plan. The family ate what was made, or they didn't eat. 3 chores, 3 tests, money, laundry, and dinner. Each one handed to a teenager with the same quiet message behind it. This is yours now, and I trust you to get it right. Number 9. Opening and managing their own bank account. A 1960s teenager didn't need a parent standing next to them at the counter, signing off on every deposit. They walked into the bank, opened a passbook savings account in their own name, and kept it going themselves. Every deposit got stamped by hand into a little booklet, and that booklet became proof of something bigger than money. It showed a kid who could be trusted to grow something slowly, over months and years, without anyone checking in on it. No app sent a reminder. No parent glanced over their shoulder. The bank teller treated that teenager like any other customer, because in every way that mattered, they were one. And once a teenager could manage money, The next step was proving they could earn it under real pressure. That meant a real job, with a real boss and real consequences. Number 8. Holding a real part-time job, not a summer favor from a family friend, and not a made-up chore with a small allowance attached. A real job, with a schedule, a boss, and a paycheck that depended on showing up on time and doing the work right. A teenager washing dishes at a diner or stocking shelves at a hardware store learned fast that being 15 minutes late didn't come with a warning. It came with a boss deciding whether to keep them on the schedule at all. There was no soft landing built in just because they were young. Compare that to today, where labor laws in many states limit how many hours a teenager can even work, how late they can stay, and what jobs they're allowed to do at all. Those laws exist for good reasons, protecting kids from being taken advantage of. But one side effect is that a modern teenager rarely gets the chance to feel the full weight of a real job the way a 1960s teenager did. Show up late enough times, and you don't get a talking to. You get replaced. That was the lesson, learned early, usually the hard way, and it stuck for the rest of a person's working life. A passbook savings account and a real job. Together, they meant a teenager wasn't just earning and saving money anymore. They were operating inside the real economy, the same one every adult around them lived in, with the same rules and the same consequences for getting it wrong. Good. This confirms today most banks require a solo account holder to be 18, with joint/custodial accounts as the workaround before that, which fits the contrast naturally. 8 items in. Take a step back for a second. Not one of these was taught in a classroom. Nobody sat these teenagers down at a desk and handed them a worksheet on how to manage a paycheck or run a household chore start to finish. These were domestic and money skills, handed over quietly, as trust, not scheduled as lessons. A father showed you once. A mother expected you to figure out the rest. Nobody circled back the next week to check your work. And the gap between then and now shows up clearly in something as simple as a bank account. A 1960s teenager could walk into a bank alone and open a real savings account in their own name. No parent required to co-sign or share it with them. Today, most banks require you to be a full 18 years old to open an account completely on your own. Before that, it has to be a joint account, shared with a parent who can see every deposit and every withdrawal. That's not a small shift. That's the banking system itself deciding a teenager can't be trusted with their own name on their own money. In the 1960s, a bank teller made that call in one conversation. Today, it takes a law. 4 more responsibilities to go. And these next ones are different from the first 8 because they didn't just involve a teenager's own money or their own dinner plate. They involved other people's lives, real people who were depending on that teenager to get it right, with nobody standing close enough to catch the mistake before it happened. Number 7. Basic home repairs. A leaky faucet, a blown fuse, a screen door hanging off its hinge. These weren't things a family waited on a repairman for. A father showed his son once, maybe twice, tightening a washer or flipping the right switch on the fuse box, and after that it was simply expected. Nobody asked the teenager to fix the faucet. He just noticed it dripping and fixed it, because that's what you did when something in the house broke and you were old enough to hold a wrench. That kind of quiet ownership over the house itself, fixing what was broken without being told, was one thing. Being trusted with a person was something else entirely. Number 6. Real childcare. Not an hour of babysitting while a parent ran to the store. A full day, sometimes longer, watching younger brothers and sisters completely alone, feeding them breakfast, lunch, and dinner, settling arguments, keeping them away from the stove, the street, and each other. A teenager as young as 12 or 13 might run an entire household of children for hours at a time, and the parents went to work without a second thought. Compare that to today. Only 2 states in the whole country, Illinois and Maryland, even set a legal minimum age for leaving a child home alone. And most states don't set one at all. They just offer loose guidelines and leave the rest to a parent's judgment. Which means the law itself is still catching up to a question a 1960s household answered every single morning without ever writing it down. Is this kid ready? Back then, the answer was yes. Hand over the house and the kids inside it, and go to work, trusting it would still be standing when you got home. Here's a number worth sitting with for a second. Back in the late 1970s, close to 58 out of every 100 American teenagers were working or actively looking for work. Today, that number sits closer to 35, and even during the busiest summer months, it barely climbs past 40. That's not a small dip. That's millions of teenagers who 1 generation ago would have had a job, a boss, and a paycheck, and today simply don't. This isn't about looking back with rose-colored glasses. It's a measurable shift, real numbers, real trend lines, showing that responsibility itself got quietly pulled out of the hands of teenagers and handed somewhere else. Not because kids got lazier, because school, safety rules, and a slower path to independence all stacked up together and pushed the working years further and further back. Which brings us to the responsibilities most people today have never held even once, at any age. Number 5. Writing and mailing their own checks. Paying a real household bill, in person, on a real deadline. A teenager might be handed the electric bill or the water bill with cash or a check already filled out and sent down to the office to pay it before the shutoff date hit. That teenager wasn't just running an errand. They were a working part of the family's financial system, the same as a parent, trusted to hand over real money to a real stranger and come home with a receipt proving the job was done right. That kind of trust with money led to an even bigger kind of trust. Trust with a car and with someone else's life riding in the passenger seat. Number 4. Driving the family somewhere alone when it actually mattered. Not a joyride with friends. A sick grandmother who needed to get to the doctor. A part or a package that had to be delivered before a shop closed. In a real emergency, a teenager with a fresh license might be the only one home and the only one who could drive, so they got behind the wheel and handled it. No adult in the car, no one to correct a wrong turn. The weight of that drive stayed with them long after it ended. And once a teenager could be trusted with money and a car, the last step was being trusted with the family's own voice. Number 3. Representing the family to an adult stranger. Negotiating a price at a shop, standing at a counter and calmly saying a bill was wrong, or answering hard questions from someone twice their age, all while a parent was busy or simply not there. This wasn't a school debate club exercise. It was a teenager stepping into a room as the actual face of their household, expected to hold their ground the same way an adult would. Here's the part that's hard to believe today. A teenager back then might dispute a bill at a store counter alone, then drive a sick relative to a doctor an hour later, then come home and pay the electric bill before dinner, all in a single afternoon, all without a parent standing behind them checking every move. Ask most 30-year-olds today if they've ever done even one of those 3 things completely alone, and a lot of them will go quiet trying to remember. Look back at everything so far: the paycheck, the laundry, the dinner, the bank account, the job, the home repairs, the childcare, the bills paid in person, the drive that actually mattered, standing alone in front of a stranger and speaking for the whole family. Not one of these was really about the task itself. A leaky faucet is just a leaky faucet. A bill is just a bill. What made every single one of these count was something bigger sitting underneath it. An adult somewhere deciding to let go of control and hand that job to a kid completely. That's the real pattern here, and it's worth saying plainly. We didn't strip these responsibilities away from teenagers because kids got worse at handling them. Nothing about a 15-year-old today is less capable at the core than a 15-year-old was in 1965. We stripped these responsibilities away because we got worse at trusting them with anything at all. Somewhere along the way, letting go stopped feeling like raising a kid and started feeling like a risk nobody wanted to take. 2 responsibilities left, and the first one is the one that made every other one on this list possible in the first place. Number 2. Managing their own time with zero supervision. School, a job, chores, watching siblings, all of it stacked into one day, with no app buzzing a reminder and no parent standing over a schedule making sure it all got done. A 1960s teenager had to hold the whole week in their own head and actually follow through. If something got missed, there was no gentle nudge to catch it. There was just the missed thing, sitting there, and a lesson that stuck a lot longer than any reminder ever could. And that kind of self-management was really just practice for the biggest responsibility of all. Number 1. Being trusted alone with the entire household for days at a time. Not an afternoon. Not an evening. Days. A teenager left in full charge of the house while parents traveled, ran the money, cooked the meals, handled anything that broke, and kept younger siblings fed and safe the whole time. This is the root of everything else on this list. The paycheck, the dinner, the bank account, the repairs, the child care, the bills, the drive, the stranger at the counter, the schedule held together with nothing but memory. Every single one of those was really just proof, piece by piece, that this teenager could be handed an entire home and be trusted to bring it back in one piece. Which brings us back to where we started. That 15-year-old at the kitchen table, counting out exact change for the electric bill. That wasn't a chore. It was never just a chore. It was a rehearsal, a small, quiet trial run for a kind of life nobody rehearses for anymore. A life where you're simply handed the keys and trusted to make it work. We didn't just lower the bar for teenagers. We quietly stopped believing they could clear it. So tell me honestly, which one of these 12 did you actually do before you turned 18? Drop the number below. And if this one hit home, you're going to want to see the next video, because we're not done digging up what we used to expect from our kids.